Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This is the fifth event in the PATH Effective Outreach and Engagement Services series, Safety First, Person-Centered Engagement, and Secure Outreach Strategies. It is the top of the hour here, so I'm just going to kick us off with a couple housekeeping slides before we get going. I want to let you know that this event is being recorded, so everyone, and audio is now broadcasting, so everyone should be hearing my voice. We are providing audio via your computer speakers today, and we do have phone as a backup if you need that. Just let us know in the All Questions box right underneath the slides there. But we do encourage you to use just the computer audio if possible, and please choose just one audio source. So if you're hearing my voice through both the phone and the computer, you can hang up your phone. The views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation and discussion do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the Center for Mental Health Services or the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. We are providing live captioning for today's event. You can access that by clicking the link on the slide there, and we've also used that link in the All Questions box. It's going to be pinned right to the top. So once we move on from here, if you want to access live captions at any point during today, you can find it there. You just click on that link, and the captions will open in a new tab or window anywhere, and you can put that anywhere you want on your screen, and then you can adjust the size, color, and speed of those captions. Your line is going to be muted for today's presentation, but we do have a couple ways for you to interact with us. I see many of you have already found that public chat box. It's going to be located just right underneath my picture to the right of the slides there. You can type in there to contact fellow participants or our presenters today. Just be aware that anything you type in that box is visible to everyone in the room. As I mentioned, we also have that All Questions box, and please do type in all your questions in there, content and tech questions. We will answer your tech questions right in that box, and we will save your content questions for the Q&A session at the end of today's event. And then you also have some status icons. It looks like a little guy raising his hand right above the slides there. If you need any assistance, you can raise your hand, and we can assist you, or you can type your question into that All Questions box. So with that, I'm going to pass things over to our moderator today, Kate Rio with Advocates for Human Potential. Kate, are you with us?
I am. Thank you, Zach. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I see even Guam is on the phone, so thank you so much for joining us. The first thing I'd like to do is introduce you to Doreen Gross. Doreen is the PATH Program Coordinator in SAMHSA's Division of State and Community Systems Development. She has more than 20 years of experience working with grants and contracts portfolios associated with individuals who are at risk for or experiencing homelessness, including PATH, treatment for individuals experiencing homelessness, cooperative agreements to benefit homeless individuals, and the Services in Supportive Housing grant programs. Ms. Gross has worked with other federal partners, including the USICH, the Department of HUD, the Administration for Children, Youth, and Families, and others to coordinate services, policies, and housing and homeless-related activities. She served as a contracting officer representative on the Homeless and Housing Resource Network Technical Assistance Contract, which provides technical assistance and support to federal, state, and local agencies, as well as providers, individuals, and families who experience and or are at risk of homelessness. Ms. Gross holds a master's degree in social work from the University of Maryland. Doreen, would you like to say hi?
Yes, hello everyone. So good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today during this challenging time. I'm sure many of you are spending less time in the field than you normally would. However, mental health services, substance use treatment are essential in a time of crisis. This is especially true for people experiencing homelessness, who right now are even more vulnerable than usual. I would encourage all of you to visit the webpage that SAMHSA has set up for helping individuals, providers, communities, and states respond to the pandemic. That page is samhsa.gov/coronavirus, all one word. Protecting yourself and the people you serve is always important. Today's webinar presents some strategies for ensuring that outreach and engagement are person-centered and that consideration is given to the physical and emotional safety of both outreach workers and people being contacted. On behalf of all of us here at SAMHSA, thank you for the work you do, and we hope you find today's presentation helpful. I will turn it back over to Kate. Kate?
Thanks, Doreen. I really appreciate that. The first thing we'd like to do is a poll. So what is your current area of practice? And please select all that apply. We'd like to see who's on the phone today, or who's in the room, I should say. We'll give it just a couple of more seconds because it's still moving, and then we can move on. Thank you. I think it's still moving, but I think we're going to go ahead and end the poll in just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It looks like we have over 50% of the people are in the homeless outreach arena, and then we have a large amount of people that are with housing. Thank you all for joining. I really appreciate it, and I hope that we meet all of the goals that we are shooting for today. So our agenda is we've already had our welcome, and I'm going to do introductions of our two presenters. We're going to talk about patient-client engagement. So we're going to actually define it. We're going to talk about relationship building, and then we're going to talk about strategies in practice. And then we're going to have a section on safety first, and then we're going to have a discussion and questions. So if you have questions when you hear the presenters talking, please go to the all questions box, which is right below the slides, and put your questions in. And then at the end of the presenters' presentations, then I will go ahead and call out those questions for them to answer those verbally to you. Our learning objectives. This is what we hope that all of you will have at the end, that you'll have an increased understanding of the diverse experiences, perspectives, and safety needs of individuals experiencing homelessness and SMI and CODs. You'll identify ways to use person-centered engagement to build rapport and support individuals to access services and make healthy choices. And you'll be able to discuss strategies for staff safety and security while conducting outreach and engagement activities. I'd like to now introduce our first presenter. I'm going to read her bio to you and then go on with the second one. So Deb Warner is the Technical Assistance Lead for HHRN. She has been engaged in efforts to leverage individual and community assets to build quality, supportive health, housing, and social services that improve resiliency, recovery, and social well-being for individuals, families, and communities since 1989. In addition to her work with HHRN, she serves as the project director for the California Youth Opioid Response and coaches 6 counties in California on implementation of medication-assisted treatment within criminal justice. She is a nationally recognized expert on addressing the needs of women and families experiencing homelessness, substance use, and mental disorders. She has led transformation initiatives as well as leadership coaching and cross-system program development to improve access to quality, person-centered care. Her past positions include Associate Director at Beyond Center and Executive Director of the California Women's Commission on Alcohol and Drug Dependencies. Our next presenter is Sherry Downing. She is a senior program manager for AHP and deputy director for HHRN. She is nationally recognized for her expertise in addressing homelessness and housing issues, particularly in rural and frontier areas. She has expertise in the issues that lead to and sustain homelessness in rural and urban environments, including poverty, domestic and sexual violence, trauma, chemical dependencies, mental health disorders, and co-occurring disorders. She has participated in creating several resources on a range of topics, including professional boundaries, trauma, rural opioid issues, and homelessness among various subpopulations. She currently chairs her local public housing authority's Board of Commissioners. So now I'd like to turn it over to Deb.
Great. Thank you so much. Kate, can you just confirm that you can hear me?
I sure can. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. It is an honor to be here with all of you today, and particularly to have the opportunity to co-present with Sherry Downing and work with Kate Rio and Doreen, and all of you great people who are doing wonderful work in the past programs and then other services with individuals who are experiencing homelessness. Just a couple of things before I start. First, I do really want to invite and encourage you all to stick questions in the question box, but also to put in comments in the public chat. If you hear me say something that you really like and you sort of repeat it in there or say, I really like this, that actually is helpful for me. And also if there's something that you have a different perspective or it sparks something in you that you want to share, go ahead and use that public chat to share that with your colleagues and people who are doing similar work really across the country. I love looking at all of the diversity of agencies and individuals and all the different geographic areas that are covered within these particular webinars. And I also did notice that many people here are already working in outreach for people experiencing homelessness. So I think what I'm going to do is go pretty quickly through this very first section and really so that we can spend a lot of the additional time in some of the strategy-specific pieces. You will hear me providing information both from my work experience, some of my personal experience, and then some of the research and best practices that we know in this field. And hopefully that you'll hear something that will spark a memory for you or that you can directly use in your practice. So we have this really started with what is patient-client engagement defined. And particularly those of us who are working in substance use, mental health services, and behavioral health care industries, and in healthcare providers, outreach and engagement has a particular kind of meaning. And I want to start there because a lot of times that's where we're starting and what we're expecting. So the concept of patient engagement in healthcare is really defined as the desire and capability to actively choose to participate in care in a way uniquely appropriate to the individual in cooperation with healthcare providers or institutions for the purpose of maximizing outcomes or experiences of care. So that concept of patient engagement, it really requires that the patient come in able to actively choose to participate, and that the healthcare provider creates an atmosphere where they can do that. Sometimes that works well for people who are experiencing homelessness, and sometimes there are so many barriers to actually get to that position that there's a lot of work that we need to do early on in order to be able to get that level of engagement for somebody in our healthcare system. So within the healthcare system, there's really 4 common attributes: personalization of services so that they're relevant to the individual who's being served, having those services be accessible, showing a commitment to patient and client engagement, and then building therapeutic alliance and rapport. And again, these are some of the things that we're striving to get to, but it takes a lot of work ahead of time often for somebody to get to this level of engagement. And it really is very different for different people. So for me to come to an appointment at 3 o'clock knowing that I have a call at 4 o'clock, you know, my level of commitment, personalization, and access is going to be really relatively quick. I just want you to tell me what I need to know, do what I need to do, and I want to get out of here. That's a very different kind of piece than if I'm going to come there and my appointment is at 3 o'clock and I have difficulty managing exactly what time I know it's going to be. And when I get there and I'm in the waiting room, all of the people are really staring at me and wary that I'm there, and I'm not really sure what you're going to tell me or do to me when I get there. In that situation, the engagement, the personalization, the access really has to have a softer touch and really can also take additional time. So we want to think about this backdrop in terms of building patient and client engagement. And for those of us who are working in clinical settings and in healthcare settings, we really want to strive in all of our services to delivering this level of patient and client engagement, particularly when it comes to some of our behavioral health services. If somebody comes in for a broken leg, you still need to do these kinds of things, but pretty much the treatment isn't going to vary so much, right? But if somebody is coming in who has a behavioral health condition or serious mental illness or is experiencing high fluctuations in mood because of their sugar, then you really do need to be particularly tailoring some of the services and needs to meet those their unique needs. So when we think about people who are experiencing homelessness, if we're providing services in a facility, in a healthcare providing agency or in a government institution or even a community center, without outreach for many people who are experiencing homelessness, they can't get all the way in there to actually access those services. And there's a number of different reasons as to why. And I think that these are important context for us to have as we're moving forward and thinking about, they're almost some of the things that we need to overcome. So the first one really is a lack of self-efficacy. People don't necessarily anymore have the belief that they're able to effectuate change in their own life, that they're actually, if they have a chronic cough, that they're actually able to live a life without having that chronic cough. That if there's an appointment time available at 3 o'clock, they expect that they're going to fail in terms of getting there. They don't believe that they have enough control over what they're doing or that they matter enough to really be able to access those services. So part of what we're doing in outreach and engagement is infusing some of that hope to build some of that self-efficacy. Another reason why outreach becomes so important is isolation, and oftentimes that comes to social exclusion too. I often talk about social inclusion, social identity, social inclusion, and social exclusion. So you have a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness who really want to still be accessing and participating in the services that are available and are really striving to be included, and that can take a huge amount of effort and work. So if they have a barrier such as transportation to be able to get to that clinic, or that they don't have any clean clothes to wear to go to that clinic, they often will isolate and avoid access because they don't want you to know of the current situation. The opposite of that, or further magnified on that, is people who have experienced so much social exclusion that they don't see themselves as really allowed or able to walk into your particular clinic or office. And a lot of that is really attributed to stigma and discrimination. So they've been put so far aside from participating in mainstream society that when they go into a store, everybody pays attention or follows them or tells them that they're not allowed to be there. When they try to access services at the library, they get special attention of what they can and can't do and are monitored more carefully. So oftentimes they'll actually give up on trying to participate in those things, and that's where we find people who move into the encampments or identify a particular park bench or place to go where they feel safe and they don't have to do that interfacing because it's so difficult for them to be able to participate in, and they're really socially excluded from accessing those services. So as many of you know, outreach plays a really important bridge to help people say, yes, you matter, yes, you are a part of our communities, and yes, you have a right to access these services. Let me help bring you into providing some of these supports and resources. Let me see you as you are and just get to know you and then build in some access to these services. And then and thank you, William Higgins, for putting a comment into the chat box that builds into this conversation. So if what you're saying does resonate as true for you, please jump in and share. If you have different perspectives or other stories that you want to share, please also put that in as well. So this is, again, comes back to why the importance of why outreach is so important. So I want to just touch bases a little bit in terms of person-centered engagement, because again, without that outreach and this focused engagement, that it's very difficult for many people experiencing homelessness to access those health services so that they can be thinking about how they're engaging there. So it's almost a pre-engagement. And it's interesting, when I work with behavioral health care agencies and they talk about outreach, they think of outreach and marketing as the same. We're going to put ads in the phone book, we're going to create flyers, and those things have value, but those things alone won't reach the populations that we're talking about reaching. So that brings us into person-centered engagement, which really is about relationship building. So I do think it's always important for us to pay attention and remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and everybody has all of these needs, but we really start with our physiological needs. If we do not have food, water, warmth, I actually think that having a place to go to the bathroom goes along into these physiological needs. That, for me, is one of those pieces that is so pivotal and important, and then also rest. If we don't have those things, then it's very difficult to pay attention to anything else that we need in terms of building our relationships, being able to contribute. So paying attention to our physiological needs. The next level up is our safety needs. Then we come into connections, belonging and love, and this talks about intimate friendships and friends, but we also a lot of times in our work really look at connecting versus disconnecting. And, you know, particularly now where we're talking a lot about the social distancing or the idea of physical distancing, but so this idea of being alone and together, that's really focusing on what our needs are in that area. First, we have to pay attention to our safety and our physiological needs. We also are really paying attention to how we connect. So when we think about that social identity and and social inclusion and exclusion, that really comes in here. Then we move into our esteem, our sense of feelings of accomplishment. SAMHSA sometimes speaks about 4 pillars of recovery: health, home, purpose, and community. And this really comes to that purpose. What is it that I am really here to do? What gives the value to my life? What makes a difference? And then, of course, self-actualization, achieving one's full potential, creative activities, being of service, and all of those, spiritual development, and all of those pieces as well. So we want to, when we're thinking about and we're doing our outreach, we really need to be paying attention to, are people meeting their physiological needs? Is that some of that base? Are they safe? And then also some of these other pieces, which are helping people to really maintain their sense of respect and dignity as they move forward. And I think it's really important. This is a quote actually out of the National Academies of Sciences publication around the efficacy of permanent supportive housing and lasting impacts. It's a really great reference to use. But I think it's really important for us to remember, when you are experiencing life without housing, you know, the cement is really hard. If you're on cement on your skin, it's really pretty brutal, right? So you're experiencing the extremes of the elements, a lack of privacy, a lack of a place for privacy or social interaction, or sometimes I like to talk about, you know, sometimes one of the things that we really need is a place to go and nurse our wounds. You know, that place to decompress after a particularly hard day. And when you are living without housing, sometimes you're able to makeshift some of these pieces. You're also exposed often to violence, victimization. You don't necessarily, a little bit of a sense of unpredictability. But you, so what was I about to say? So when you're subject to this much vulnerability and you don't have that place, then really you're almost in a perpetual state of trauma. And so everything becomes heightened. thus, the most important, best thing often is to create that sense of safety through sustained housing. Now, again, that sustained housing has to feel safe for you. So depending on what your life experience is, it may not look, it may not look the same as what's automatically available, but really thinking through what it is that somebody needs in order to provide that level of support, and also recognizing that people are in a perpetual sense of trauma, I think, is really an important element there. So on this particular slide, it's just some of the different things that we know about people who are experiencing homelessness, that they do have high needs, they're often difficult to engage, that they are often very disengaged and distrustful of public systems. So sometimes when an organization says we serve everybody, they don't exactly mean it. I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't be that direct, but a lot of times we say we serve everybody, but really what we want to do is we want to be able to serve the people who are the easiest to serve of our hard-to-serve population. And if somebody doesn't feel like they are that person, or they're no longer able to jump through hoops in that way, then you're gonna just be of disservice to them. So they're not. Thank you, Chad. So they're not necessarily going to be able to access your services. You're not really going to do what they want, or worse, you're going to actually create something that is even that may put them in a more difficult position. So we know that people start this way, and we also know that engagement really starts with relationship building, and it can take months or it can take years. And living true to your word and not making promises that you can't keep are some of those most important elements in terms of what we know. So in terms of developing somebody's sense of safety, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there are different elements of safety. There is physical safety, which includes being protected from violence and physical harm. And I'm sorry to say that many of the people who we serve, their concept of what is violence or physical harm or abuse is different than what you or I may think of. We might look at something and we say that's abusive. If that's the only thing they've experienced, they may not see it that way, or they may see it as a necessity of survival. So physical safety, psychological and emotional safety, cultural and racial safety, very important for us to continue to be aware of this, particularly in places where people experience discrimination or what's the word for criminal justice disparities. The people have to feel culturally and racially safe where they're going to be in order to be able to grow and move up in that kind of towards recovery. Self-efficacy and control, and then also a sense of security. And it's important to remember that for what's secure to one person is not always the same as what's secure to another, and that some people are much more risk-adverse than others. So one of the things that I always think is really important for us to remember is what feels safe to one person may feel dangerous to another. And it's great to be on this call with Sherry, and I just looked at the clock, so I really am going to speed up. Because we use this example sometimes of a woman who is always sitting on a park bench, and that's where she feels safe. And everybody is very, very worried about her there because she doesn't want to go to a shelter. She wants to stay on her park bench. And the outreach workers that are working with her are consistently trying to help her access housing or shelter. For her, that one spot, that park bench, which is what she knows, is the place she feels safe. So for her to change to another place, that's very scary and that feels dangerous. You have to bring the safety of what she has on that park bench to that other place for her. Otherwise, she's not going to be able to make that move. So sense of safety. paying attention to our welcoming behavior. Are we being accessible, approachable, accepting, responsive? You know, I just got a new T-shirt that says, if you can be anything in this world, be kind. And I think that's really one of the things that is my most important message today, and really in this webinar too, is the most important thing for us to remember to do is to really be kind to people who are not accustomed to people being kind to them. So we want to be accessible, approachable, accepting, and responsive. And if you'd like to, you could take a moment and just put into the public chat some of the attributes that you find that are so important in a professional who's being engaging. So there's some that are on this slide right now, but go ahead and put some other comments in here. Linda notes empathy, patience, acceptance, transparency, non-judgmental, excellent, truthfulness, trust, warmth, genuine. Thank you so much for that. And so as we are doing engagement, we really want to be thinking about getting to know people's stories, taking the time to listen, be consistently present for them, follow up and follow through, helping setting goals, working towards small steps. So, you know, you want to make things doable in a way that somebody can do them, right? So if what you walk in is, you know, we have these great resources, and if you do these 12 different things, then you're going to be able to move up to the next level, or you're going to be able to access this type of housing. That's very overwhelming for somebody. So identifying those small steps that people can do, and then reminding yourself and them to really take the time to say good job on that when they've accomplished something. Letting the person who you're working with lead, equalizing your relationship with them. It is not always about you giving to them, but you hearing their story. When they offer you a cookie, you taking that cookie. I don't eat sugar, but still you taking that cookie. You know, that equalizes, that builds that relationship and that rapport, and moving at the individual client's pace. These are all strategies that help build that longer-term relationship so that it is in process. And then the other piece I just want to touch on briefly is we also, as much as we can, really do want to avoid re-traumatizing individuals. So, you know, thinking about creating a safe environment for people when they come in, using a non-confrontational soft approach, being aware that they may over-respond to neutral cues and under-respond to danger. I think that's one of the most important things about people who are living in trauma or even recovering from trauma, is there's this tendency to, something is going on right around them that is incredibly dangerous, and they're just under-responding. It's like they don't even know that there's danger right there. And then something happens that seems, it might be completely innocent. And when I'm working with direct service providers, I'll talk about the fight about the hairbrush, where, you know, somebody looked at me wrong, and I'm convinced that that has put me into danger and has created a strong response. And maybe they did, but there's over-response then to those pieces. So helping people learn some coping skills so that and being prepared for that to be the case, knowing that people who experience trauma often see the world as victims and victimizers. So you really want to take that gentle approach and, you know, be aware that when they're trying to get more bus tokens from you, the reason they're trying to get more bus tokens from you is because they want to have a sense that they have some power in this relationship. It isn't just you holding all of the power. It doesn't really hurt to give them the extra bus tokens most of the time, so that it sets that relationship to help them experience those relationships as grounded. And then supporting them to identify their triggers, self-soothe, ground, and be able to participate in those therapeutic activities. Maybe it's walking by the center and taking a look, and maybe it's walking in or just sort of seeing what it's going to be like. But again, helping them to take care of themselves while they're doing it are some of the important pieces really around re-traumatizing. So I'm just going to take a moment and offer Sherry the opportunity to provide any additional insights in what we've been discussing so far, and then we'll pick it back up. Sherry?
Thanks, Deb. Nice job. So I don't have much to add here. I'll add some more when it's actually my turn. But I think I just read something on Facebook, so I'm going to share it with you all because I think that it really sums up what Deb has been saying. So this quote, and I can't even attribute it, I have no idea who wrote it, but it says, "Lack of communication ruins everything because instead of knowing how the other person is feeling, we just assume." And I think it's really easy to make assumptions on behalf of people who have multiple vulnerabilities, including homelessness and serious mental illness and substance use disorders and co-occurring disorders, and the list goes on and on. I think we may know a little something about that person from observation. We can say, oh, you know, he's got blue eyes and he's, you know, needs a prosthetic and he's been homeless for a decade, and so he must need A, B, C, D. But I think we can only evaluate other people on the surface, and so it is spectacularly important to form these relationships in order to help somebody get where he or she needs to be. So that's what I would add to that, Deb.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Very, very nice. So now we're going to move a little bit into also the person-centered engagement strategies in practice. And again, thank you all for taking the time in the chat box to share some of your experiences and thoughts. And I'm going to, I wish that it had that function where you could put a like or a thumbs up next to some of the different concepts and content that's written in there, because there's some really great content. So I'm just going to focus on a few different strategies that I've found particularly helpful. One of them is really being strength-based, and so often we talk about doing something that's strength-based, and what that really means is that we spend an hour and a half talking about problems, and then we have 10 minutes at the end to talk about what somebody's strengths are. And that really does need to flip. And I understand that many of our payment systems are really geared towards identifying problems and finding solutions and developing treatment plans around those. But I am a strong believer that success begets success. For most young people when they're in school, if they're good at math and bad at English, then the math homework they do first and they dredge on the English homework. That's just sort of human nature, that when we feel that we're successful at something, when people feel that they're successful at something, it helps build further success. So, some of the examples, like having people participating in a choir or a chorus, identifying those pieces that give them meaning, that also gives them a basis of where they can have success and be achievable, builds their self-efficacy, it builds their sort of dignity and respect, and also why they should be accessing that help in the first place. So being strength-based, and it can mean a lot of different things for different people, really becomes like such an important element of engagement and outreach and making a difference in building recovery and resiliency for people. Hope really is a foundation of recovery, and peers often can really help provide some of that sense of hope just because somebody can see it in somebody else before they see it in themselves sometimes. A strength-based assessment that I often will use with different groups is to think about what are people's gifts of the hand, gifts of the heart, and gifts of the head. So, somebody might be good, have nice handwriting. Somebody might do their kid's hair really nicely. Somebody may have been trained as a carpenter. Somebody might have access to a truck. So thinking about, just those kind of practical things of what their gifts are, that they're also then able to help people. Gifts of the heart, those things that they're passionate about, their ability to express empathy or love, and then gifts of the head if somebody speaks Spanish or is good at math. So thinking about and identifying some of those different special gifts that people have. I do have people, sometimes you need to use a cheat sheet if you have difficulty identifying and finding strengths. But you really do want to take time. And if you take time and you get used to looking for strengths, it's fairly easy to find them in people. Some people are really funny. Some people, they just, anyway. So this has, and you have access to these slides, some just different strength tips for being engaging in strength-based case management. I think that most of this is also covered in some of the other things that we're talking about, but really encouraging people to get in touch with those things that they're passionate about, that they like. And sometimes it involves, sort of thinking about what kinds of things did you like to do when you were in elementary school, because for some people it's been so long that it takes going back there. For that person who says, I love to bake, finding a way that they can actually bake cookies and provide those cookies to the other people at your center is going to give them where they can then enjoy them. That's going to do more positives for that individual than you can imagine. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking on a risk reduction assessment tool that I think is also particularly helpful, because when you're engaging in person-centered engagement, you're also in a constant sense of taking a look at their risks and how you can kind of prioritize what they most need help with. And you can think about risks as coming in, do they have risky behaviors? Do they have risky attitudes? Are there risky environments? As you're thinking about risk and communicating with people about risk, or asking them if they mind if you communicate about their risks, part of what is so important is expressing concern. I'm concerned about you. Not I'm concerned that you're doing this or you shouldn't be doing that, but I'm concerned for your safety and well-being because I genuinely care what happens to you. And then offering resources if people are available. So this, and again, you have this in your slide deck so you don't have to have it memorized right now, kind of breaks down some questions in sort of what we were saying before. What are some of the real risks that you're seeing somebody who they may be experiencing now? And, for example, that, food, what is the risk of death depending on, what their health conditions may be? Where are they presenting? What is showing up right now? So there's the actual risks. There's their mindset. How are they feeling? Are they in pain? Do they need to get well, or are they really okay with where they are? And then the last one is the setting, kind of what's happening around them. Where are they in a physical environment? Who is around them? Are they in front of a store with a store owner who is calling the police every 15 minutes? They then end up at higher risk than if they're in a place where that may be less of an issue, right? So that thinking about the risk set and setting as a framework to ask and engage people, and then thinking about paying attention to what resources that person wants along with a smile and respect. And this just goes so far, and I know many of you absolutely know this. So, thinking about, do they have fresh water? Sandwiches is on here, and I actually updated this to add good chocolate because I was talking with a group of people, and we're always talking about the importance of healthy foods, right? So offering sandwiches. For a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness, there are some who have trouble accessing sandwiches or healthy food. But for a lot, there's sandwiches everywhere. There's like just those squished up sandwiches that lots and lots of people are delivering, and resources. And really what they want is a piece of not cheap store, the cheap 99-cent store candy, but a really good piece of chocolate, something that reminds them I'm special and I can enjoy the finer things. Naloxone and, anything that helps prevent overdose, feminine hygiene products. So, there's just some other things on here that are particularly relevant resources for sharing. And then also offering assistance. So, problem-solving conversations. But again, you want to be doing this in ways that is based in what they may want and ask for, and ask permission before you start offering suggestions. So, first aid, resources, knowledge education, assistance accessing something that they desire, and problem-solving conversations, all really pivotal, important work once you've established a relationship and people respond to it. If it is delivered as a suggestion, not you really need to go do this. And if it's offered in the spirit of I care about you. Motivational approaches, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying before. Please remember that change is hard for everyone. We all have different things that we are trying to do. It might be stopping eating sugar. It might be losing 10 pounds. It might be running a marathon. It might be continuing to maintain our recovery. And when we're talking about asking somebody to give up their current place that they're living, friend circle, place where they know where to go to get the different things that they need in their life for something that's completely uncertain, that's really hard. We're basically saying you have an opportunity to completely change your whole life. And so remembering that, remembering the stages of change, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but helping people have a sense of hope that they can move into a different piece and what steps might be required. So particularly when it comes to substance use, I am a firm believer that you don't want to take something away from somebody without giving them something to replace it with. So if somebody is experiencing homelessness, vulnerability, trauma, difficulty in their family relationships, et cetera, and you say you really need to stop your substance use and these things will go away. Well, that may be true. Some of those problems may be able to resolve themselves if they stop their substance use. But right now, that substance use may be their coping strategy for addressing all of that. So they have to be able to touch what is going to move, what they're going to have, what they're going to get that they can hold on to, and that it will work for them in order to move forward into some of those other action steps. So, helping people to recognize, and us recognizing that there's many paths to recovery, many right doors. What moves one person from point A to point B and becoming a miracle often is really, really different than what would work for somebody else. And there are several different factors that enhance motivation. I'm going to start to roll down. Don't worry, I see chat because I've actually gone over my time. But I think it's important for us to remember that there are different things, some positive and some negative, that can enhance motivation. But it's very difficult for a negative thing to enhance motivation if you don't have any connection to a lifeline. So whereas a positive thing, sometimes you can actually actively use that to enhance motivation. And sometimes I use the example of pregnant women where you have a new hope and you really want to do what's right for the baby that you're about to have. That critical life event can be a really great motivator, unless you are so afraid that child welfare is going to remove that baby as soon as you have it, in which case it's both a motivator and it's really a point of incredible pain and shame and fear. So having those lifelines to enhance your motivation and being with somebody every step of the way becomes really important. Also in this deck is a modification of the FRAMES approach for motivational enhancements. This is something that SAMHSA has in what's called Tip 35, which is listed in the resources. And I just want to let you know it's kind of a recipe for how professionals can engage with motivation and have a motivational interviewing kind of conversation. When we're working with people who are experiencing no self-efficacy and have very low trust, you don't want to just follow this menu, because really that's almost like following a menu to manipulate people into doing what you think that you need to do. You really want to frame it as it's still a useful tool, but you want to make sure that what you're doing is you're offering and you're listening to them and their priorities and helping instill that sense of, I think you're capable of moving in that direction, and helping them to build up their own motivation and sense of control in their own lives. So that's kind of the motivational enhancement frames piece that fits, I think, with person-centered engagement as well. And then I'm just going to close with this last quote because this is one of my favorite quotes by Don Coyes, who is the founder of White Bison. Words are important. If you want to care for something, you call it a flower. If you want to kill something, you call it a weed. So again, thank you all, and I'm going to turn it back over to Sherry, and then we'll have a little bit more time in the question and answer time.
Thanks, Deb. Nice job. All right. So I am going to just talk a little bit about safety first. And this is really about you, and it's about your clients. So this is an interesting double-edged sword and something that we just need to be, spectacularly aware of. So to get started with this part of the conversation, could you just add to the chat, what do you need to feel safe? What do you need to feel safe? I know when I look at people who are experiencing homelessness and I think, if there isn't a business or a restaurant that I'm going to be welcomed into, if I don't have a car and a car key so I can get away, if I don't have a door to unlock and a door to relock behind me when I get home. Those are all really scary things. My family, love, friends, stability, family, a crisis plan. So yeah, you guys have thought a lot about this. My job, support, stability, family and friends. So we're seeing a lot of the same things coming up, and thank you for that. I think this is really important to stop and think, what do you need to feel safe? I think it's important to stop and think, what does my client need to feel safe as well? So we're going to talk a little bit about this from both sides of that. So I will just remind you, and I know that you guys are all really good at what you do, and that you care a lot, or you wouldn't be in this kind of work. What I will say is discretion is absolutely critical. If you talk publicly about where people are staying, it can put them at significant risk. So I remember I have spent a lot of my time talking to people experiencing homelessness and talking to people who serve them. And one thing I will say is I was talking to a gentleman who had been living out in a little tent in the woods outside of a community here in Montana. And I said to him, what are you afraid of? And he said, I am afraid of the young men that come through the camps with their baseball bats and their sticks and their knives. And he said, we have no recourse. They will destroy anything they want to, and we're at risk if we try to fight, and they often come in gangs, and it's really scary. He said, I haven't been able to sleep for weeks. And he had tears in his eyes. It was really hard to hear. And I said, why, and this was me early on in my career, why don't you just call the police? And he said, they don't come here for us. So discussing the location where people are staying can really put them at significant risk from people who don't understand what they're going through or have compassion or empathy for their situation. So I'm just going to remind you that if we're talking about safety, this is an important thing to keep in mind. Some of the outreach tips. Okay, you can barely hear me. I am sorry about that. Let me see if I can improve my sound. All right, is that better? Can you tell me if this is louder?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay, perfect. So outreach tips. I know that you're all good at outreach. I think outreach is one of the most important things you can do, but it takes time and patience and follow-up. You've often got one chance to connect with somebody and begin to form a relationship. And if you break a promise or don't show up when you said you would, or don't keep your word, that can be the end of the outreach and engagement process because people can give up on you really easily. People have been burned often, and they don't give you a lot of chances. So meeting basic needs is an important component. I would encourage you, take things with you. Take blankets, take food, easy open. The little can openers are a good thing to take. Sunscreen, insect repellent, food, feminine hygiene products. Back in the day when you could still get them, the containers of Clorox wipes are a useful thing as well. But you want to, and water, always water. But meeting basic needs is an important component. And if you start out by offering something, it's sort of a human reaction that people are going to be grateful and maybe reach back a little bit. But safety, boundaries, and ethics are primary concerns for outreach teams. And so you need to stay safe, and you also need to maintain appropriate and safe boundaries. And I will say that outreach really is an interactive process over time, and it honors the whole person and meets him or her where she or he is at. And that's literally, non-judgmentally, metaphorically, it's important to honor the whole person. And when I said earlier that we can't always judge, we can't usually judge just by what somebody looks like or the situation that they find themselves in, that takes time to form a relationship, and honestly, suspending judgment is a really important component of that. And respect is key. Something Deb said earlier, I just wanted to underline. She said it may have been a long time since somebody was asked what they really want. I would say that it's been a long time since anybody treated many of the people we serve with respect. And so I think it's important to be exquisitely respectful. I think it's important to be exquisitely respectful because people often have not been shown any type of respect for many years. And that kind of goes back to not being welcome in stores or restaurants, or followed around if you go in to shop, or not allowed to use restrooms, or the list can go on and on. So there are 7 pillars of engagement that I like to use. Show up ready. Show up, have your best game face on. Be ready to engage in your own heart and mind. Have the time to do the work. Learn the street. What do I mean by that? Learn the street. I'd say learn the people who are the leaders there. There always are leaders in any environment. There are people who are going to be constant in the street. There are resources that they know about that have to do with their environment. And so learn the street. Be present with intent. So what do we mean by that? Be present with intent. I think you can go in with the intent of helping someone, but if it isn't the right help, if it isn't what the person actually wants, a piece of chocolate as versus, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich made at the church basement, you really need to be intent in your ability to reach out and help that person find his or her own way. And I would encourage you to ask. Be present with intent. Ask, what do you need? Because one thing that we know is that if we ask somebody what they need to get better, and we help them access whatever it is they said, they begin to get better. It's sort of magic. So if I say to somebody, what do you really need to get better? And he says, I really want to learn to play the guitar. That's probably going to be a great thing to facilitate if you can figure out how. Always offer something. So that might mean what the stuff that you carry in your vehicle with you, and be ready to offer something. One thing I've noticed over and over is people's skin is so, so fragile, and when they're in the sun weeks and months on end, it can be really hard. So skin care products and sunscreen can be really important. Keep coming back. Just keep coming back. People will start to anticipate and pay attention. Come back when you say you will. Be routine, and meet people where they are. I think it's particularly important to be non-judgmental. And I'm seeing Thomas Sousa saying, present with intent, back up the talk with the walk. That is perfect, Thomas. Thank you. And non-judgmental, you guys are saying, listen and hear with capital here. Excellent. You guys get this. You're doing it every day, and I know that many of you could teach us a lot of things. But these are all the pillars of engagement that are particularly important to remember. So this is actually a picture of a campfire. Oh, there's a big surprise. Gosh, it looks like a campfire. One of my grandchildren took this picture when they were camping this summer and shared it with me, and I think it's sort of perfect for talking about this topic, because fire can be enormously comforting and satisfying and warm you right up, and it can also be dangerous. So it's important to remember to be safe in your own work. What does that mean? So, of course, always let your supervisor know where you're going. No, you shouldn't go anywhere that somebody doesn't know where you're going. That's important. Go in pairs. Seek a trusted insider who can serve as your guide. Enter the encampment slowly and cautiously, and if possible, with an invitation and a guide. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm seeing a question. What is the seventh pillar? So the seventh pillar, oh my goodness, it's missing on my 7 pillars of engagement. I apologize. And I honestly don't remember, so I'll have to look it up. Oh, my apologies. Goodness. Thank you for pointing that out. The other little, tip that I typically give is don't interrupt illegal activity. If you see a drug exchange or something going on, this isn't the time or the place, and it isn't your role. So I would say, you don't want to contribute to it or condone it, but you also don't want to interrupt. So you can put yourself at great risk that way. Now I will say, I've been to a lot of encampments. I've been under a lot of bridges, and people turn these into their homes in many ways. I've seen family pictures up against the wall under a bridge. I've seen people who've hauled beds and comforters up there and mirrors and music, and that's true in the encampments as well. And so act here is critical. You need to be respectful. Wait to be invited to sit down. Don't walk into somebody's personal space without an invitation or permission. These are their homes. Absolutely, April. Thank you. And Jenna says, I would offer a cigarette. Sometimes it's the only thing they want. Absolutely true. I don't personally carry cigarettes, so that wouldn't work for me. But if you do, absolutely. Homelessness is bad for people. Pick your battles. Absolutely. So here's a few more safety tips. Never sneak up on someone. If somebody has a serious mental illness or co-occurring substance use disorders, they can be hypervigilant. You really don't want to scare anybody. Don't sneak up on them. Don't touch somebody unless they're really expecting to be touched. So I would say, you don't want to walk up behind somebody and tap them on the shoulder. You want to respect the individual's home, and you want to clearly identify yourself and your agency. Talk about what you can do. Talk about what you can't do. And if you see somebody I suggest that you come up with a little bit of an elevator speech to tell about who you are and what you can do to help, and then listen. Be extremely aware of body language. That can be for safety, and it can also help you begin to come to know this individual. Dress for the environment. One of the first times I was going up into an encampment with an outreach worker, it was very interesting because I was just dressed as I usually dress, so, you know, business casual, and I happened to have on open-toed sandals. And the woman who was taking me out said, absolutely not. You need socks and shoes. And we had to actually go back to my hotel and get different socks and shoes because it's really not safe to walk out in that environment with open-toed shoes. You don't know if you're going to step on a needle. You don't know if you're going to run into a virus, or honestly, you know, people are using the space around an encampment for bathroom privileges. They're using, you know, they're using substances that aren't necessarily safe. They may have hepatitis or any one of a number of other illnesses that are contagious and dangerous. So beware and be aware of where you put your hands, and don't touch your face until you've washed. Take hand sanitizer if you can. And then again, and this is a little redundant, but come with gifts. And then be respectful. You need to respect someone's personal space, their physical space where they live, and the community in which they live. And I encourage you to respect all three as you would if you were visiting your neighbor or your friend. This is another picture by my grandson of the creek. That's how we say creek in Montana, outside their camp this summer. But I just want to encourage you to know the area. Every single community has its own personality and needs, and I strongly encourage you to know that community prior to trying to engage. Spend some time learning the culture of each community, and if possible, do some initial outreach with people who are known to the residents for a warm handoff. It might be another outreach worker, somebody who's had the time to develop a relationship, or it might be a resident, but a warm handoff can go a long way to helping you engage with the community. Focus initial efforts on identifying and establishing a rapport with the leader. Again, I'll repeat this, there's always a leader, and anytime you can engage with that person and have that person help you, tailor your outreach to the community, that is beyond valuable. And it sort of builds some automatic trust. And then tailor your outreach based on the needs of the community. I knew a gentleman who used to go up into a camp that was above Helena, Montana, where I live. Very big camp. It had been there for, at least a couple years, a long-term camp, where people lived year-round. And there were children there who had never been to town or a doctor or a school. And the gentleman who went up there, a veteran who was engaged with that community, would always take pliers because he said, you know, there's always somebody who needs a tooth pulled, and this is the only way I have of doing that. This gentleman knew the needs of that community, and he would always take coats and blankets, and it was really about knowing who and where and what they needed. And then Lisa is saying, even within culture, we never know for certain what is needed unless we do the work to find out that individual's needs. Absolutely true. I think that's right. I also encourage you to develop a consistent schedule and tailor outreach days and times. Be reliable. People, again, as I said earlier, you might work for months to begin building a relationship with the woman on the park bench, but unless you show up when you say you will, she won't give you the time of day if she doesn't think she can trust you. So be reliable. I would schedule weekly visits to encampments or more if needed, but it should be on a consistent schedule. And then inform the residents of the outreach schedule. That way, if they really don't want to engage with you, they don't need to be, front and center in the camp. Inform and coordinate with partners. And finally, this sort of bookends the other, be discreet with information about the camp. People experiencing homelessness are at much higher risk from us than we are from them, in general. Although certainly you can put yourself at risk too by not abiding by these. And then these are just a little bit more about the schedule. Keep your word. And know that evaluations might take place over many short, frequent visits. Announce your arrival. I like to stop at the edge of the camp and kind of say, hello, I'm Sherry Downing. May I come in? If you're not invited in, don't try to force an encounter. If you are invited in, enter with great respect. This is someone's home. I, again, encourage you to work up an elevator speech. It should be short. It should describe what you do and can do and how you can help. And then begin to identify needs. Maslow's hierarchy is always useful, but people need dental care and glasses and ID and medical attention and treatment and all kind of different things. So identify those needs. And again, be exquisitely respectful. And with that, we have some time for questions and discussion. Kate, over to you.
Sherry. Thanks, Sherry. I appreciate it. We only have a couple of minutes, so we're going to go through a couple of quick questions. Please remember that you can download the slide deck right underneath the slide. Just click on that and then click on the button that says download files, and then you'll have the deck, and that'll help a great deal. And our email addresses will be in there, so you can email us directly if you have other questions. So the first question I'd like to ask is the VI SPDAT trauma informed? So Deb, could you answer that one for me?
Sure. I actually was just starting to put a couple of answers to some of the questions into the chat box, and Lourdes had actually asked about risk assessments that are available and free, and the VI-SPDAT is usually free. So the thing with an assessment being trauma-informed is it asks difficult questions. And probably the main important piece to pay attention to is how you are asking the questions. I would say that it is more trauma-informed than many because it is okay for somebody to skip a question, and you can either have them fill it out or you can fill it out. So you can set it up with letting people know that you're going to be asking some difficult questions and why, and that they have the opportunity to not respond to different questions. Being prepared to when somebody gets upset by a question, to pause, to be compassionate, to be kind as they're responding to it. Some tools, you have to ask every question. You have to ask the question exactly the way it's written, and that makes it much more difficult to be trauma-informed. So giving people choice, letting people know ahead of time so that they're going to be prepared are all key pieces. But they do, it certainly does ask difficult questions that can be difficult for people to hear. So you do want to make sure that you set it up properly. And I was typing an answer to Lourdes around some of the other assessments in the chat box, and I'll finish that as people are finishing too.
Okay, I appreciate that. We have a question that I think is really important, and Sherry, maybe you can answer this while Deb's typing, and I think this may be our last question. Any suggestions for maintaining morale with individuals encountering multiple barriers? Tips to keep them engaged when things just don't work out as quickly as we hope, especially. Sherry, you may be on mute.
And yes, I was. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks.
So I think this goes back to the exquisite respect. I think there are going to be times when things don't work out, and I think really listening to the client, really hearing what he or she is saying is important. The other thing that I think is important is to go at this from a base of strength. Every single person I've ever met who's experiencing homelessness has unbelievable strengths. You have to have those to survive without a home. And so I would, one of the things that I would do is talk to the person about their strengths and what might need to change in order to help things begin to turn around. So creating a plan, a 5-10 step plan to begin moving beyond the stage where nothing is working can be useful as well. And that, I will just say, needs to be crafted and owned by the individual. And I would also encourage letting the client drive the bus. So there you go. That would be my answer to that, Kate.
Thanks, Sherry. Everyone, we are a little bit over, so I'm going to go on. One of the things I want to show you is we have all of the references listed in the slide deck, so please make sure that you download that. We will also be sending out the recording to everyone who registered, so you'll have the recording and you'll have the slide